Yes, well, I had a number of things I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. So let's start. It's been a busy stretch. As last week the council had a very productive meeting, I thought, with Paul Wiedefeld with respect to WMATA's future. We expect to see his plan for how he proposes to address the safety issues associated with WMATA pretty soon. We heard within a couple of weeks, and that was a week ago, so we're very anxious to see what that proposal is. I think our general reaction was pretty supportive of the approach he's taking, and I think we are all concerned about the long-term financial sustainability of the WMATA operation. Of course, that's above the council's pay grade. It's really a state issue having to do with the compact between Virginia, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. So we'll see what is proposed. We also had very productive briefings by MTA with respect to the Purple Line, and I think the council is uniformly pleased that the Board of Public Works agreed to the contract. We were satisfied with the presentation we received as to the county government's exposure with respect to costs, and it's clear that there's going to be some room for continuing conversations with the state in the memorandum of agreement that will be that is in the process of being put together between the state and the county. So that was quite a very successful transportation week. Last week we also introduced a bill that calls for the deferral of any increases in property taxes for seniors at a certain income range, and so we are optimistic that that sends a message to our community that as we move into the set of budget decisions that are in front of us, that we are very concerned about how our budget decisions affect our most vulnerable and our elderly residents. We spent a lot of time with the people last week. We had about 200 folks who testified at our public hearings on the budget. There's an online petition against a property tax increase, and I think what we heard was universal concern about class size and the achievement gap, as well as the affordability of ongoing costs. I'll draw your attention to something that's in our packet and we'll be talking about tomorrow. This is agenda item number 6. It's Mr. Farber's report on the operating budget and overview of our economic circumstances and the details contained within the budget. It's very thorough, it's very complete, and it identifies a lot of the fiscal issues that the council will be taking up. And I'll just note, Mr. Farber also notes the county executive's concerns about the sluggish economy and our possible need for future revenue enhancements or reduction in services, even under the proposed budget. So we will get into this in more detail tomorrow, but it is jammed with incredible information and comparisons to previous budgets, as well as property tax revenue issues and the like. So I do encourage you all to take a look at this. This week, we have another interesting week. Tomorrow, the new minimum wage bill is being introduced. My personal view is that we've done a lot to improve working conditions for our residents. We've approved a minimum wage bill already and a paid sick leave bill. My personal view is we can't do it alone, though, and we need the region and the state to step up to the proposed challenge that this particular bill suggests. We'll see what my colleagues do. We have a hearing scheduled for June, and we will be taking it up later. And the big news, I hope you make a big deal of it in your various communications, it's early voting. It begins on Thursday at 10 sites from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And same-day registration is available for new voters. You just have to bring proof of residence. You can vote by mail, And if anyone has a question, they can go to 77vote.org. But this is a big deal, and it's very exciting. They have a new voting system in place. It's going to be interesting how that works out. But this is really important news, and I do urge our media outlets to get this out there. We've had very little coverage of the details of what our residents are looking at in the days before us. I really encourage you to put that out there. Of course, Election Day is April 26th, and that will be 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I wanted to sort of conclude, say we've really had a terrific working relationship with our Annapolis delegation this year. I really want to compliment them on their hard work. I know they're not quite done, but I really want to thank in particular Nancy King, head of our Senate delegation, and Shane Robinson, head of our the delegates, who have done a tremendous job in coordinating with us and their leadership on a number of issues that have affected Montgomery County tremendously. School construction, Watkins Mill, interchange, the Department of Liquor Control issues. I spent way more time in Annapolis this year than I've ever spent before, and it's been a real pleasure and an honor working with our dedicated team down there. And it's a very impressive group. And then finally, one of the news items that came out last week is, and that we're supporting tomorrow, is welcoming the Donahue companies to Bethesda. They're going to be bringing 240 jobs and 40 new ones with a $2.5 million capital investment. There's some state and county money involved in supporting their move, but generally we're very pleased to welcome them, and they're locating their headquarters here. So with that, I'm open for any questions you may have.
What parts of what Mr. Wiedenfeld said at the meeting, or at your meeting with the general manager last week, was most striking to you with regards to either his approach to safety or the need for financial sustainability?
Well, I think he was not specific on his proposal yet as to how he's going to prioritize the safety issues. I think what we did hear is that extended closures are not in the cards. But what I do think that we heard was that there will be a plan that will be available to the public that will explain the process that he will be employing going forward. That's the best I can say. We didn't get the details, as you know. But I think the sense that there's a firm hand at the helm is what we heard. And I think that's really important for the credibility of Metro and the future of WMATA. So I'd say those points are the key points.
So what about the meeting was productive? You said it was a very good meeting with the general manager. What was good about it?
Well, for the one thing, we had it. It's not always easy to have a relaxed conversation in the absence of a particular crisis. But we had a very positive meeting, and I think we had felt that his comments were well taken, very thoughtful. And as I said, we got the clear message that the general manager and the board members are on top of the issues that have confronted the agency for many years. I don't think we felt that we're going to, hopefully, at least that we're not going to be bouncing from crisis to crisis, but that a plan is being put together that will be clear about their approach to safety issues and going into the future.
Are you saying that you think Metro will actually address a problem from start to finish rather than looking at it and then moving on? Where do you mean bouncing from issue to issue?
That's where how they've been handling things so far. As I said, what I believe that we heard is that he's going to be producing a plan, which would be presumably a series of recommendations and a proposal for addressing how they handle the safety issues and mechanical issues that Metro has been dealing with on a regular basis. A plan. We don't have the answers. I don't know what's in the plan.
Is there anything in Mr. Farber's memo that specifically jumped out at you as a matter of concern or surprise?
Well, I'd say I wasn't surprised about most of the things that Mr. Farber said because I've been worrying about them myself. I think the real issue as I said, a couple things. One is the issue about the prediction for a sluggish economy going forward. One thing I also hadn't realized is that the state employees did not receive a cost of living increase this year. I knew about that Social Security recipients haven't received any cost of living increase this year, but I hadn't realized that that was also the case with the state of Maryland.
So that has what implications?
Well, we're compensation issues are the major driving force of all budgets, particularly the school's budget, and about 90% of their budget, is people. Likewise, the county is about a little less than 80%, I believe, and those are costs that are recurring costs that are built into our budget obligations. So looking at the details of how that falls out is something that I know the council will be paying close attention to, and that was a piece of information I was not familiar with.
What I think you may have talked about this a couple weeks ago, but the possible approach of just needing a simple majority saying that for the tax increase because it's going toward education. Has your mind changed on that at all?
I don't think we should play games or get creative about how we deal with a straightforward charter limit on requiring council votes, a number of 9 votes to exceed the charter limit in the budget. The challenge with that issue is to the extent costs are associated with different portions of the operating budget. You can't say it's all associated with one big piece of it. Under that scenario, you could override the charter limit on a daily basis because you'd say, well, half your budget is going to the schools, you're going to increase that part, and you can increase those other parts as well, but we're going to count the schools part as warranting your exceeding the charter limit. That's the challenge of the reasoning that would permit that, I think.
So you're saying you don't think funding for schools should be a reason to try to go around the charter limit?
I don't think that I think the charter limit is a serious constraint on how we choose to spend our money, and I don't think that you can legitimately exceed the charter limit solely by choosing to say that additional dollars are simply going to schools. And the charter is pretty clear that that's not an option. State law was enacted that asserts that we have that right. But I think that has real implications and really moral implications for us in terms of how we treat our voters and what they expect of us through the charter.
Okay, so the other way to do that would be to vote, try to reach a unanimous vote as to whether to raise taxes.
That's correct. That is exactly the issue. So this is a 9-vote budget to do most of the things in this budget.
What could the implications be on perhaps future campaigns for council members who want to be running for county executive?
Oh, if someone wants to criticize someone for whatever vote that they've taken in another position, they will do that, I can assure you.
Are you at all concerned about that?
I'm not.
Because you're not running.
I think what's important is that legislators make the right decisions for the right reasons, and if you can't explain them, you shouldn't make those decisions.
Are you considering running for county executive?
I'll make a decision about that at a later time, but at this point, that's not anything I'm thinking about.
That's fine. I had another question on a different topic. So for the property for the WMAL towers, it was determined a couple months ago that Montgomery County wouldn't be able to purchase the whole property. Are you or other council members considering asking for a part of that property to be given to schools? You had said class sizes was important to you in terms of budget.
Well, that's a capital issue in terms of land. I don't believe that I am not aware of any effort at this point to pursue that. There are a number of close schools in the vicinity that could support additional school capacity determinations, but all that is in the jurisdiction of the Board of Ed.
So where do we stand with Westbard final vote? I don't know if you saw the protests this weekend. I don't know if that impacts your thinking about when this might come up for a final vote, if it wasn't ready anyway.
It's a very interesting situation. The councils voted on the Westbard plan. They're straw votes. Certainly people could revisit them. We are awaiting the final resolution that would include a fair amount of language that we haven't had in front of us to date. We asked the planning board to provide us with some additional words with respect to particular properties in the Westbard plan. So at this point, I've actually delayed the date that the council will take up that resolution. I think it's going to be the first week in May now. The community seems to be very, it's great. The community's interested in this. I think if most community members, if they looked at what the council has done, they would see that we have really tried very hard to listen to everyone. And we have the staff analysis that has been before everyone has addressed the issues of transportation and school capacity. Again, this is a master plan. It's a 30-year vision for how the area may redevelop. And I'm not sure if people fully appreciate that, but that's what the council vote is. It's not a vote on a particular project. And basically the areas that we ended up focusing on were the properties, some of the properties right along Westbard Avenue there, where there already are very tall buildings. So we really focused on the internal area of the Westbard area neighborhood, leaving the edges alone. So yeah, I'm aware they've been busy over the weekend, and I'm sure we're continuing to hear from those folks.
The takeaway from these protests is that the downsizing that you did from the Plan Commission's earlier iteration of this was simply not enough. So do you see any scenario under which you would go back and try to whittle this down more?
Well, at this point, no. We've worried about these issues. We have prioritized affordable housing. We've prioritized compatibility in the area. Where there is height, people tend to not realize there's some pretty tall buildings there in Westbard that have existed there for a long time. And those are where there may be a couple of other buildings similar to those right in the center there of the Westbard area, not adjacent to single-family neighborhoods. There's universal agreement, it seems, that the shopping center area should be refurbished and redeveloped. And the moving parts of this are ones that we have worried about really very carefully and very thoughtfully. And I think at the end of the day, should the possible developments there go forward, people will be pretty comfortable with how it turns out. And right now it's an interesting scenario. We've never quite had this situation where people have continued to be unhappy after we've really done our best to listen to all sides of all this. and put in place county priorities that we believe to be very important. And it's unprecedented that we're leaving this much time, really, as between the straw vote and the final vote on this, for further conversation. So that's where we are right now.
Do you think there's a larger problem about trust and credibility here, that the problem is that folks that are out there protesting simply don't find the numbers credible? They don't find the school population numbers credible, they don't find the traffic numbers credible. I have a hard time. I mean, I looked at the student population numbers, and it was nearly 95 K through 5 students. That's all. I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't ring true.
Well, it's really interesting. I realized, the Westbard community is one that really hasn't lived through too many of these land use debates for a while, and so it's a constant helping people appreciate the analyses that go into these master planning processes, and it's really been very interesting. Our staff has spent a lot of time with them, sharing with them the analyses that are consistently employed everywhere throughout Montgomery County. But this is one community that really hasn't been part of that conversation previously. So we've been bringing staff. The planning board has been trying to help people analyze, appreciate the analysis that's been employed. I mean, if you were to tell people what we know from our transportation folks, that actually congestion levels have decreased over the past few years, that's countywide. People might say, you can't, what are you smoking? You must be crazy. But the data is the data. And oftentimes, perception is different from fact. And all we can do is listen to our experts, ask questions, make sure the analysis is as thoughtful and as responsible and as justified as possible, and then we take it under consideration as we move forward.
Speaking of congestion data, I have another question back about the WMIL property. Toll Brothers has said that they are considering adding as many as 300 or more luxury housing units, and it's located right near 495 and 270. Is Montgomery County Council watchful or listening for the possible traffic impacts that could have?
Well, we have no role to play with respect to that particular property. That property is subject to zoning that currently exists, and will be reviewed by the County Planning Commission. But they'll be reviewed under the existing laws and rules that govern how projects can proceed, how transportation issues associated with that project are dealt with, and how the children expected to be generated by that community will be dealt with, and how that fits into the scheme of things. But that's not a council function.
But transportation planning is.
Well, we set the general overall rules, but we don't apply them to every single land use case that comes. So that's what the planning board does. So that issue is right in front of them right now. I don't know where that is on their schedule. You probably know more than I do.
They haven't. They've released a preliminary plan over the weekend, but I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Who has released it?
The developers.
The applicants. You don't know. Okay, well, yeah, it's in process, sure.
What's the long-term outlook for the county budget? All the issues I've mentioned, sluggish economy, rising costs of MCPS aren't exactly going away. So do you foresee the county coming back to the residents next year and asking to increase property taxes again?
Well, that's a really good question. And that's something I don't think this council is going to want to have to do moving forward. So, this is the year for us to focus on continuing costs and continuing needs. The school system has had an incredible influx of children over the past few years, and they are very stretched, and we're very sympathetic. On the other hand, we have residents who are concerned about the costs of all this, and so are we. And we certainly don't want to have this have a property tax increase proposed every year.
But is the county doing anything to cut costs now for future, or I guess MCTS?
Well, those are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks.
And you also talked about possible reduction of services in the future, specifically what services from the county?
I'm just quoting from Mr. Leggett's transmittal memo. So, that this is always a concern to us. In the past couple of years, we've had budgets that we've approved go into effect, and then immediately the county puts in place a savings plan. We've had that a couple of times. And so that's a concern to us in terms of predictable and reliable services to our residents.
You had mentioned earlier the possible amendment for the West Grove residents, meaning I would guess the elderly, just to connect to that. Children are also vulnerable residents if you think about it, and the budget does significantly affect Montgomery County Public Schools, given the increasing enrollment and the priority of keeping class levels down. What are your thoughts on the possibility of increasing funding in line with the county executive's proposal?
Well, we'll see what we do. This is, as I said, going to be a budget that requires unanimous support, if to the extent we exceed the charter limit. And I know that all my colleagues have a variety of priorities in terms of what they'd like to fund, and their concern about tax increase, balanced by their concern about tax increases and ongoing costs. Welcome to the puzzle that we will be solving in the next couple of weeks.
Just one more question. You mentioned you had as many as 200 testimonies. A couple of them were from younger members of your constituents. Do you have any comments about?
We had some very terrific testimony during our public hearings. Of course, the youngest folks tend to gather the most attention, but it's very thoughtful, and it's very real. And frankly, I think we had a third grader testify in our last night, and he was just terrific. Gaithersburg Elementary area. And I think it's good for all of us as a council and as a community to see the voices of the future. That's really important, especially, and I felt pretty proud that Montgomery County Public Schools had produced such an articulate speaker in third grade.
Does this mean you might consider the funding in the category that would include the after-school program he was requesting?
We shall see.
Do you get a sense that you are going to get a unanimous vote on the budget?
Well, I'll have to if we're going to exceed the charter limit.
But
If we're not, if we do not exceed the charter limit, everything, it will have serious implications for county operations. Because to fund, I think, all existing agreements, services and the like, they're assuming that we're going to increase spending by $106.5 million. Over the charter limit. So $106.5 million in spending would have to be eliminated one way or the other.
In which category?
One way or the other.
Could that mean schools, one of the biggest portions of the county budget?
Certainly. Could mean, but we can't speculate yet. But these are the pieces of the puzzle that we are. I'm going to be helping my colleagues, put together in the next couple of weeks.
Considering that people are requesting an increase, it's still an option for the county council to reduce the.
We have, I view the county executive's budget as a series of important recommendations, but at the end of the day, it's the council's obligation to review those recommendations and to review the tax burden on our residents. So at the end of the day, we're the ones who set the tax rate, and we're the ones who will take responsibility for however this gets sorted out. And that's a very serious responsibility that we take very seriously. But there are lots of moving parts at this moment in time. And that's why I direct your attention to Mr. Farber's very complete and thorough analysis, not to mention all the attachments that sort out the priorities, the long-term and continuing costs, and the new proposals.
Which part of the analysis, just to guide our reading?
I'd start on page 1. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.